Farm Bureau. Ben Hartsock joins us right now. The pride of Chillicothe, Ohio, played at Ohio State, spent a number of years, about a decade, in the National Football League, and now he does all kinds of things like remodel houses and hobby farms and drives Mustangs too fast. Benjamin, good afternoon.
That's a pretty accurate description. I wear a lot of hats, and I think that was a pretty fair and honest, balanced description. I appreciate it, Richard.
You got it, my man. Good visiting with you last week in Atlanta. You have been on the road since then. You were at Big Ten Media Days the last couple of days. I would argue that based on what Kevin Warren said about college football playoff expansion when the current contract ends, that he's going to soften his hardline stance, the play that he made was abundantly clear. He was acting in the best interest of the Big Ten's media partner, trying to get this thing to the open market. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, 100%. Commissioner Warren's comments, it's more what he didn't say versus what he did. All of these executives and coaches, they know how to dance around a question. But you remember last year when the USC job came open and Mike Tomlin at Pittsburgh was considered or was rumored to be interested in that USC job? Remember what he said? He came out and he said, there's not a booster with a check big enough for me to leave the Pittsburgh Steelers. He ended that speculation instantly. Mm-hmm. Well, Kevin Warren did the exact opposite. He stood up on the stage and he didn't say anything about, hey, are you guys going to continue to expand? Well, he didn't really say. He kind of said, we're still kind of looking at evaluating. Hey, I asked him point blank on the Big Ten channel. I said, hey, two questions. One, are you working with the SEC? Are you developing a relationship with the SEC and Greg Sankey, or are you guys in competition? Well, Greg Sankey's a wonderful man. I respect him a lot. He's really smart. He didn't say anything. So he could have squashed all of those things. Hey, we're done with expansion right now. Hey, playoff expansion is put to the back burner. He could absolutely have Mike Tomlin to that and said all of those things and given us all, okay, let's take a breath and play a football season. But he didn't. And what he didn't say then for me is the clear indicator that we're open for business. The Big Ten land grab continues to happen. The playoff expansion feels like a likelihood. And I even went so far as to ask him about Commissioner Warren, do you believe that we're trending towards full-blown professional college football? And he didn't say much about that either, which is a clear indicator that it looks like we are.
Yeah, I mean, there are, I think, holes to punch in the idea of college football becoming professional football because there are so many things missing, right? Players right now have all the power, and there's no organization on the other side of it, right? You don't have, you've got roster limits, but you don't have a free agency period. You aren't locked into contracts, and to me, that's just a really big deal. It's hard to call it professional football at the college level when it doesn't have the things that make professional football work.
You don't have to have collectively bargained deals when the switch gets flipped. See, the problem is, Richard, the NCAA and the universities didn't want NIL that switch to get flipped, but the courts made the decision for them, and so that's gotten us to where we are, where there was no regulation and it's total anarchy. There are already court cases being litigated in the state of California that are the framework for a true pay-for-play model. It's not a framework for pay-for-play, but it will blow up any limitation of pay-for-play, and then all that happens is every player is in a free-for-all for themselves, and so there will be representatives for each individual, but it won't be collectively bargained. I agree with you. Collectively bargaining is the way to do this. That's the most palatable and easy to understand. But the problem with that is college sports is inherently a chapter of life. The guys are only there 3 or 4 years. So we asked some guys about that yesterday at Big Ten Media Days. The guys that are there are all upperclassmen. They said, we're not worried about it. We're going to the NFL next year. Yeah. So it's inherently a challenging thing. But I don't think the United States court system gives a rip. They're going to have another decision that they're going to make, and the floodgates may open without any structure. And just like the NIL marketplace is bonkers and weaponized, it will happen the same way if it goes true pro sports.
Ben, I read a tweet yesterday, and I don't remember who it is to give credit to, so my apologies for that. But they said the more Kevin Warren and Greg Sankey, i.e. the Big Ten and the SEC, agree, the worse it is for everybody else. And I think maybe there's a lot of truth to that. So kind of going back to where we started with that relationship and the question that you asked Kevin Warren yesterday or a couple of days ago, even if they don't like each other, if they're working toward the same goal, is that bad for everybody else? Talking about the
I would
prefer
the Big Ten and the SEC. They had an end game where they were locked in lockstep. But my read on Commissioner Warren is they're trying to eat each other. The SEC would love nothing more than to have the Big Ten cease to exist. That's what the SEC wants, and vice versa for the Big Ten. They're not working together. We were debating this today on ESPNU, saying this could end up with a Big Ten tournament, an SEC tournament, and then a college football Super Bowl at the end of it. Maybe is the way this thing will work out. I don't know. They don't seem. Again, what Commissioner Warren didn't say is that they are working together, and that's just for those two conferences. Another giant area that I hope that they are working together is the other, 95 schools in the FBS that may be left out in the cold in the New World Order. Think of the brands and the fan bases that are passionate, the West Virginias and the Pittsburghs, Texas Tech and Washington State, passionate fan bases that aren't going to have a place at the table, that are either going to be relegated to the chopping block to sustain themselves. I don't see why the Big Ten or SEC feels any responsibility to subsidize them. But for them to be in any way, shape, or form viable, they need to be subsidized. But we are in an era of self-worship, whether it's individual team members, individual teams within the conference, individual conferences, regardless of other conferences. No one's looking out for anybody else right now. It is the era of get your own bag.
So I wondered out loud this yesterday, if the idea of automatic qualifiers goes away, which, by the way, if the ACC and the Pac-12 had just a little bit of foresight and had voted for the 12-team playoff, they would not find themselves in the precarious position in which they currently sit. But they didn't do that because they were so mad at the SEC and kind of got taken for a ride, I would argue, by the Big Ten. I know that's the conference in which you played, but I think they kind of got misled on that deal. What if the SEC, when this was all said and done, or maybe the SEC and the Big Ten said, no automatic qualifiers, and then just to really stick it to the Pac-12 and the ACC, they said, but we will guarantee a spot for a group of 5 school.
Yeah, those are all details. Like I don't disagree with the ACC's move to put the brakes on everything, because it was such a tectonic shift a year ago with Oklahoma and Texas coming into the SEC. It was like, hey, we agreed upon these rules or this structure with the world looking like A, and all of a sudden you flip the game board upside down and now it looks like B, so we need to go back to the drawing board. I understand that. And meanwhile, the Big Ten and SEC were trying, okay, time to go, putting the pressure on. How this thing shakes out, the biggest domino that needs to fall is Notre Dame. And if or when Notre Dame decides, a lot of other chips will start to fall into place. The Oregons and Washingtons to the Big Ten. Perhaps something happens with the ACC where they either are willing to dissolve their conference to get out of the grant of rights, or maybe the SEC is willing to pay gigantic hundreds of millions of dollars of penalties and future rights for Florida State and Clemson. You may go. But the bottom line is, if what the Big Ten is speculating to bring in more, Stanford and Cal is a new couple names being brought into the equation. It almost looks to me like the Big Ten doesn't want to wait on Notre Dame, and they're trying to say, listen, Notre Dame, Jack Swarbrick, we understand you're the biggest cog that's not in a conference yet. We want you in, but we will go and bring other teams without you. And if there's a reality where the New World Order excludes teams that aren't in a conference like Notre Dame, that's the leverage point. Right now, Notre Dame wants to buy its time. It doesn't want to commit to anything, just like the ACC shouldn't have. So Notre Dame wants to wait because they're the most viable. So the Big Ten is trying to place leverage on Notre Dame to make a decision by investigating Cal, investigating Stanford, Washington, Oregon, those like, and we'll see how that shakes out. But
we're out of time, Ben. I got to cut you off. We're out of time.
Yeah,
I appreciate, as always, the conversation. I'll leave it with, what if that decision blew up in the Big Ten and the SEC said, hey, Notre Dame, we got a spot for you?